Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video I'm going to be comparing the old G-Wagon to the new one. The 2025 G-Wagon is a pretty big refresh, especially for the G550 because they got rid of the V8. So we're going to find out if getting rid of the V8 was actually a good thing. Before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Mercedes-Benz of Salt Lake for giving me some time with both of these G-Wagons. Both of these are currently available for sale, so if you're interested, link to their website in the description down below. Just ask for Dylan if you have any questions. Link to my car buying guide as well. Let's get into it. Powering the new G-Wagon is a turbo 3-liter inline-6 that goes through a 9-speed automatic transmission. Fuel economy 17 around town and then 19 on the highway, with power outputs being 443 horsepower and then 413 pound-feet of torque. Now, powering the previous version is a turbo 4-liter V8 that goes through a 9-speed. Fuel economy with this is 14 around town and then 16 on the highway, with power outputs being 416 horsepower and then 450 pound-feet of torque. So less horsepower than the new one, worse fuel economy, but then has more torque and bigger engine, obviously. Before I move forward with this comparison, I do want to mention, if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Now, when it comes to front end style, there are a few changes, but not as many as you'd think. So the basic hood design and turn signal indicator design and all of that is pretty much a carryover one from the other. And you can see the headlights and the grille and all that very similar, but there are some key differences. You can see the previous version, how that grille is designed versus this one. It's got more kind of like painted sections, a little bit fancier looking. And then the bumper is also different. So you notice the openings on the new one are a little bit smaller. And then it does have little air dams there on either side. Those are bigger compared to the previous gen. So the previous gen has more openings on the front end. Makes sense. It's got a V8, so it's going to need more airflow. Versus the new one, it's more closed off. Makes sense. Doesn't need as much airflow. Inline 6. Now, just looking at some other design elements on this, I am noticing some slight differences. It looks like the fender flares are pretty much the same. They might even be the same. The wheel design, funny enough, is actually the same, but the new one's got like this gloss finish on it. You can see the silver ring. And then notice on the new one, the side step's blacked out, whereas on the previous gen, it's actually still got silver trim. You can see the mirror caps, that's all the same. And then same thing with like the roof line and all of that. But one big difference is the previous gen still has, you know, the normal G-Wagon door handles. And the new one does too, but it also has keyless entry. So that's something that's completely new for the G-Wagon. So that's a pretty big difference. But anywho, here's kind of like a side slash back view of the new G-Wagon. And then here is the previous one. So again, you're really not gonna be able to tell the difference with the exterior for the most part. But what is definitely different is the interior. So we're inside the previous version. Gotta love that V8 sound. Now, we're not gonna pay too much attention to the door panel. I just wanna show you guys some elements here on it because this is pretty much a straight carryover, one over the other. Gauge cluster, that'll be a big difference. So here's the previous gen, kind of how it looks. And then the infotainment system, not a touchscreen. So this is Mercedes' previous unit. And then this is just an aftermarket thing. But we've got the buttons for the center locking differential there, just kind of how those look and everything. And then this whole control stack for the infotainment system. And then actually the steering wheel, that's another thing that has massively changed. So here's kind of like the previous gen look. But you'll notice like stuff like the dash here, the general kind of like theme, and even these seats, how they are set up, pretty much just a straight carryover, and even like the center console, how this kind of operates. And then both of them have like the fancy headliners and sunroof as well. All the G-Wagons have a sunroof, funny enough. But yeah, that's kind of like a quick look. Oh, and then I also mentioned the previous gen, just a regular backup camera, so that's another big thing to note. And now we're in the new one. A lot quieter with the startup sound. And like I said, like you see the door panel stuff is pretty much straight carryover, mirrors, all that kind of stuff. This has Mercedes' new steering wheel, so that's a bit different. And then we got the new gauge cluster, so that's also kind of like a big difference. And then new infotainment system as well, 360 camera system. So you can see the new G-Wagon just kind of has better tech. This is the off-road page, which is pretty cool to see. And then notice how they've kind of updated the lock and differential buttons. You got the off-road cockpit, all of that, low range. So all the off-road stuff is in one place rather than being spread out like in the old one. But then you can see the rest of this. This is different, obviously, with the kind of pad, but you still got the drive mode select in this area. And then, like I said, the center console setup is kind of like a straight carryover. And then different style of seats in terms of like the packaging. This one has the lower down seats, I guess you could say. They're still nice seats, but they just look a bit different compared to the previous version. You can see the grab handles all the same. Got fancy headliner, sunroof, and all of that. And so the big thing is, well, let's pop outside and talk about that. Now the biggest difference is going to be the driving with both of these, because we've got a completely new powertrain in the new one. So let's drive them back to back and see which one performs the best. Well, we are going to start off in the previous version, same generation technically, but the pre-refresh, then we'll drive the new one. I will say the seats in this are so comfortable. These leather seats are really, really good when it comes to just overall seat comfort. Now, right off the bat, this has the G-Wagon feel that many of you know and love. Now what that is we've got a deep V8 rumble, and it just has a tank-like feel with the drive. On the seat bolster, that's funny, it kind of hugs you when you go around corners with this one. But yeah, it drives like a tank. You know, although this is a very luxurious interior, the G-Wagon doesn't hide from its, you know, military SUV roots. And I find it funny when people like criticize the G-Wagon for how it drives. They're like, oh, it's so big and heavy and this, and it's like, it's a body on frame SUV. Like, that's what it's all about. If you want a luxury car, go buy an S-Class, right? You get the G-Wagon because, you know, obviously the G-Wagon's a status symbol here in the US, but you know, the tank-like driving experience. And, you know, this version of the G550 with the 4-liter V8 feels like the G-Wagon that we all know, right? It's funny, it's got auto stop start, but yeah, it's just got that big body on frame, boxy SUV feel. You know, like the old Broncos used to do that, and you know, the old Wranglers. Yeah, I've got the new Wrangler 392, so I guess that also, you know, feeds into that. But yeah, it's not, the G-Wagon, I would say, is not about luxury. It's more so about, you know, having ruggedness, right? I mean, these things really can, with the triple lock setup, these can go anywhere. Now, I am interested to see how that new powertrain performs back to back with this, because Mercedes 4-liter V8 is really hard to beat, and I mean that. This engine in this vehicle has been detuned massively compared to what it could produce. Like, this is an engine that can easily produce 800 horsepower easily, right? And I mean, you look at the AMGs, and this is from the factory producing 600 horsepower in several cars. We're close to it. So in this car, it's just super understressed, and so it's kind of like what Toyota did for a long time, where they'd put, you know, basically they'd over-engineer the engines and just put these big engines in these cars and not have as much power as they could produce. But that, you know, led to longevity. And I think that these G550s with this generation, long term, I think these are gonna have similar resale value, or maybe even better than the G63s, because I think the reliability is just going to be better on them. And it's still it still has power. You gotta remember, this is still a 4-liter V8 turbocharged, even though it's only got 416 horsepower. Like, I'll show you guys here, because we got a little merge lane up here. I'm gonna be that person. I know, I'm gonna be that person. But yeah, it's it's still got power. This is just to demonstrate the power of the 4-liter. It's such a cool engine. Freight train of an engine. Transmission's super smooth. It's great. It's a solid setup. So overall, the G-Wagon, nobody ever called this perfect. Nobody ever called this perfect. But it's such a cool vehicle, tank-like SUV. That person got mad at me. It's okay, I understand. I was just demonstrating the power of the car, okay, Jeep Grand Cherokee? Now they feel the need to, like, they gotta get back ahead. It's a Utah thing, even though that person doesn't have a Utah license plate, but they're driving like a Utah driver. But yeah, the G-Wagon, it's cool, and in this version of the G550 still feels like one, so let's see if the new one with the new engine feels like a G-Wagon. Well, new G550. Guess we'll check the visibility around. It's the same as before, so it's really good. The G-Wagon's a box, and it has big windows, so it's easy to see out of. I am fascinated, I'm intrigued by this new G550 with the inline 6, because I'm wondering if this is going to lose the G-Wagon character, you know? Because the G-Wagon's known for being a rugged V8 boxy off-road military style SUV, and this still has most of that, but it doesn't have a V8 anymore, so it's a big difference. So initially setting off, this drives nice. Now, something to note, the G-Wagon is not a luxury vehicle. I think that people forget that. Like, yes, it's got a luxury interior and everything, but ultimately, this is a utility vehicle, right? This is built for military use, and, well, we just happen to have a civilian version because rich people love to have stuff like this, right? It's cool, right? Military vehicles are the coolest vehicles because they can do crazy off-roading. Why is this person crossing? Because they can do crazy off-roading and they look cool, and so yeah, it's a fun setup, that's for sure. So what I'll say is I'm not noticing really a big difference in terms of how this drives compared to the previous, quote-unquote, previous version of the G-Wagon. It seems like it drives pretty much the same. So ride quality, when I say drive, ride quality and all of that, I am noticing a substantial difference in the engine performance. So the auto stop start in this is way more aggressive than the auto stop start system in the V8. It's Mercedes' new system where it'll kind of like stop as you're coming to a stop, like as you're rolling, it'll sometimes shut off. So it's just it's a different system overall, which, you know, I'm thinking that's probably part of the way that they've been able to get better fuel economy with this. I want to get another acceleration. This other road up here will be better for that, but yeah, it doesn't have the same torquey feel. And it makes sense, right? It doesn't have as much torque on paper. It's got more horsepower. It does have more horsepower, but it does not have as much torque. And generally speaking, whenever you go to a smaller displacement engine, fewer cylinders, even if the engines have the same exact power, the bigger engine, bigger displacement, more cylinders always just feels like it's got more punch. Feels like, even though you literally could have same horsepower and same torque, and it always feel that way. But yeah, overall, I mean, so far, I think it drives pretty nice on the low end. I like the torque of the V8 a bit more. And we'll see here. Kind of get on it a bit. Hate this road so much, but you know. Yeah. Okay. It's a good engine. It's great for an inline 6. I'm just gonna be honest, I don't think it fits the G-Wagon. I really don't. Yeah, I I think the 4-liter V8, again, this really just comes down to emissions. The 4-liter V8 for the G-Wagon is objectively a better engine. It makes more sense. The torque, it just drives better. This inline 6 is a great engine. And so in isolation, if you just drove this, you'd be like, this drives well. And it sounds pretty, it's not like it's obviously not a V8 with the sound, but it doesn't sound horrible, right? Sounds pretty good. Mercedes inline 6. Inline 6 they got a nice deep tone to them for a 6-cylinder. But yeah, driving it back to back with a G550 and you're like, I'd rather have the 4-liter V8. So yeah. I'll be interested to see how well this new generation G550 does, but my personal guess, this is just my guess, I think the Mercedes G-Wagon sales are going to look like this, where they're going to stay the same. But then when you look at the split, before, you know, like it's always been more people buy G63s compared to G550s. But I think with this new generation, I don't think any, I mean, there'll be a few people who buy G550s, but I think it's pretty much going to go from like slightly more G63s to more 550s to basically almost no 550s, and everyone's going to buy a 63 because a 63 still has the V8. Everyone wants a 63 anyways. So I don't think this is going to be bad for Mercedes. I think part of me thinks that Mercedes did this not only because of emissions, but to make it so they could just sell more 63s. Mercedes is basically printing money. So that's the new 550, folks.